It's so amazing to have been recognised by Forbes 30 Under 30 with putting something that is high input and high impact.
If you get a no, you're not knocking on the right door.
When a young person goes from like, either they're very shy and they're not forthcoming in their ideas and stuff, because of course you have those apprehensions, to like they're presenting, they're pitching, they're like
dancing around the classroom,
and it's
just
like,
having a great time.
How can we not? How can we not keep going?
Welcome back to Little Lessons from Big Hearts. Today is a really powerful episode. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship, confidence, especially building confidence as young girls. And I'm joined by two super inspiring founders, award-winning founders, Rebecca and Rachita, who founded Sisterhood. Welcome. How are you feeling?
Good. It's really good to be here.
Excited?
Very excited.
Mm-hmm.
Sisterhood is a social enterprise that focuses on empowering girls and the education system. Can you say a little bit about Sisterhood?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's a social enterprise which delivers education programs to teen girls, predominantly aged 13 to 20. And it's essentially equipping them with the tools and skills to create social change, feel empowered to use those tools and create social change within their communities and social issues that affect them and the wider world. So we do this through education programs, workshops, talks, our Sisterhood Summer program, which is really supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs like ourselves, and giving that support that is so needed, but not necessarily given in the education system right now. So we're working hand in hand with schools to provide that support and fill that gap.
That's so amazing. And Sisterhood Summer is actually how we met. And it was a funny story because I was following someone on LinkedIn who was a mentor on the program and who posted about it. And I clicked the link. I was like, wait, this looks so cool. You were opening like slots for mentors. I filled it in. Then I was there and I met the both of you and I was like, I felt like you were really, really inspiring and really genuinely cared about what you were doing. So obviously I had to get you on and learn more about your story.
Oh, thank you so much. We're so looking forward to having you back this summer
as
a mentor.
Exactly. Yeah. And every episode is recorded in different coffee shops. Today, we're recording from Fair Shot in Covent Garden, which is also a social enterprise that hires people, young adults with learning disabilities, and tackles the 95% unemployment rate within young people that has learning disabilities. But Fair Shot is also, this place is quite like important to you. And why is that?
So back in 2021, we won a Space for Change award with an organisation called Appear Here, who rent out spaces all across London and the UK as well. And this was the exact place where we had our pop-up shop, pop-up bookshop and storytelling lab, where a cohort that we had been working with for a year through the pandemic wrote and published their book, their anthology. And this was the space where we set up to not only sell their book, but also really put diverse characters, authors, narratives onto our bookshelves, which was the essence of that whole project, and hearing young people's voices. And yeah, so we're so glad to be back here.
Goosebumps. So I was literally like, oh, it's so nice to be back.
And it's this exact space,
This was the storytelling lab. So we had workshops, we had a sellout like theatre show. We had a theatre group approach us. So that's the stage on the stairs going down, and the room was just full of actors, actresses, just this amazing story around identity and belonging, which was themes that were included in the book. And we actually sold 1,000 copies of the book.
That's amazing.
Which then created opportunity to provide 2 free programs and pay it forward to the next 2 years of the same school that wrote the book. So yeah, this has a very special place in our hearts.
And how long ago was that?
2021.
Yeah.
So full circle.
So full circle.
Yeah. Who would have known that a few years later you would be here doing a podcast about the impact you've done since?
Exactly. And then it's still, you're talking about Sisterhood Summer.
Yeah.
Sisterhood Summer has been on our vision board forever. And the marketing manager from Vans happened to walk into the bookshop, and then that's when they decided to make a donation, and that's why Sisterhood Summer was able to actually happen. It had been on our vision board. So Yeah.
Crazy.
Put your stuff out in the world. You'll never know who will walk through the door.
I mean, vision boards, they do very much work. Yes. So you now are like founders, you've won many awards, you're making a huge impact, and we'll go more into it. But how did you get to like where you're today? Like, what's your background? Where did you grow up and all of that?
Well, our origin story, or our meet cute, was at Central St. Martin's. So both of us were studying graphic design, and it wasn't until second year that we actually like met, and that's where our story started. But both of us were kind of exploring what we want to do with design and creativity. Up until then, I think we were both quite focused on, or at least that was the only option that we thought was what you do with a creative degree or graphic design, was to go into either advertising, branding, working in an agency, in a studio. But through our experience and just exploration of the things that we were interested in, we really were drawn to, I guess, what design and creativity can do outside of maybe the commercial means. And yeah, we just kept being at the same like crits together and doing the same projects together again and again and again. And then we were like, hang on.
So we didn't kind of clock it until about second year, and I needed a flatmate as well. So I had kind of like a daughter in myself. I was like, we need a flatmate, and you just keep popping up everywhere, and this is great. But I think it's actually amazing that we met, because Rachita did a gap year before Central St. Martin's. I wasn't even sure if I was going to go to university. The rates had just gone up, the fees had just gone up. This just wasn't something that I felt I could take on, and was really anxious about the financial like ask of university. But I knew that Central St. Martin's, it was on my vision board. I wanted to go, and I was like, do you know what? The universe will sort the finances out one day. And so you had a gap year. I wasn't sure if I was even going to go to university at all. And it's just how we got put in the same tutor group, in the same workshops, in the same
it's meant to be
projects at the same time. And I'm just so glad that we listened to that.
100%.
That's so crazy. Definitely sounds meant to be. And do you remember your first impression of each other? Like the first time you met?
Yes.
Bex definitely does.
I do. It was a real moment, and it was almost like a light came down as Rachita was speaking. We were in a workshop together. So yeah, I felt quite lost at university for the first year. It was very structured, very rigid. I was sort of trying to mould myself into what I thought the teachers wanted. And I had a tutor that noticed this. Thank God for teachers. I had a teacher that noticed this and pulled me up and was like, you know, you got into this university for a reason. Like, bring, you know, that spirit that we saw in your portfolio to your work. And I got put onto a 2-week program, which was external from the university, which really just, you know, built my confidence, and I felt really invested in, and I felt that that's when my spark for social impact and social change really was ignited. And then I was in a tutor group that following couple of weeks, and Rachita was there and presenting a project around how badly the American ballot card was designed one year, and how it like cost the election because there was a really big miscount. And you were just presenting a case study from the Do Good Design book, and you were so excited by the fact that design has this ability to, you know, create, well, not be good, not be done so well, but you have this amazing opportunity to create something that functions really well for society. And you were giving an example of where it had failed, and I love that you love the challenge of thinking about how you could do things better, and not just making things look pretty, but making things work and making things function. So I was like, we have to collaborate. And I remember approaching you after, A, I needed a flatmate, and B, I was like, we connect on a level with design and creativity, and an approach to design and creativity I hadn't quite found or met anyone that thought this way or got as excited about using design and creativity in this way.
It's so crazy because sometimes I'm the biggest believer in like first impressions, and always trust the first impression you have of someone. And sometimes you just meet someone and you're like, like we're gonna be friends, or like there's something here. I don't know what's gonna happen, but there's something. And it sounds from the story that that's what happened.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think saw in each other that almost that like kindred spirit when it came to design and what we wanted to do with it. And all these steps led to us collaborating, and that became Sisterhood.
And becoming flatmates.
I am becoming
Flatmates. There was a pop-up shop at university.
Yeah.
We both got really heavily involved in that. It was, fast-paced, intense. We were working under pressure together. All these skills that transfer into a business.
Yeah.
You don't realise that at the time, but you are kind of working together, and you're looking at how you collaborate with other peers in the group. And there was just something between us that I hadn't experienced with anybody else at university. And that for me was such a good indicator of a good work relationship. And that's where I thought it was, we'd go to uni, we'd do loads of projects together, and then we'd say goodbye, stay friends.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Oh no.
Here we are.
Here we are. You can't get rid of me.
And you talk a lot about like purpose and social impact and being really passionate about it. Like, how come this is something that's so important to you today? Like, how has that become part of who you are?
I think for me, if I look back to school and just in general, I think in my nature and temperament, I'm a very rebellious person, and not in a like anarchy punk way, but in a like I
stand up.
And once I'm just like, oh, this is what I want to do or explore, like I will go with that. I will go full speed with that. And I think for me, it was and I didn't realize this until obviously Sisterhood became what it is. But I think when I was doing my A-levels, I became very jaded with my education experience. And that was the first time where I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And I'm not enjoying school. I'm not enjoying learning. And I was very privileged. I went to a private school. My parents paid for me to be there. They worked so hard to be able to pay for me to go there. And I was like, I'm not getting the education that I think I should be getting going to a private school. And essentially that was almost the start of where my like rebellion within education started. Like I remember I was doing fine art, and within that everyone was zigging. I completely zagged on my fine art piece, and I was just like, nope, I'm not going to do what you're saying. I'm interested in this, and that's what I'm going to pursue. And I think it's just been a cycle of that. Like even when I went and did foundation, I didn't get into Central St Martin's the first time round, so I ended up taking a gap year. And even in that, I was like, no, I think I know I really need to go to St Martin's. I'd gotten into other universities, but I was like, no, I'm going to just take a gap year and I'm going to reapply, because I just feel like that's where I want to go, and that's where I'm meant to be. And it's just been a cycle of that.
And clearly you were meant to be.
Exactly. Could you imagine if I hadn't gone at all? Where would we be? What would have happened? And I think it's that what I realized is what perhaps was rebelliousness was actually me always following my purpose. I just didn't know it back then.
Yeah.
So I took it as rebellious. Actually, what I was doing was listening to myself. Yeah.
I love that. And what about you?
I found teenhood really challenging, and so I owe a lot to the safe spaces that fostered my creativity. When things were quite tough growing up, struggling at school, struggling with academics, it was very easy to kind of get lost at my school. There was so many students, mixed students. I wasn't confident. I would sit there and not ask questions, even if I didn't understand it. And then when I got the opportunity to pick my subjects, I nearly made the mistake of picking what I thought I should pick. But I didn't, and I went down the creative route, and I picked art, and I picked design, and I picked drama. And I owe so much to those spaces. And a bit like Rachita, there is like a rebellious side of me too, but just slightly different in the sense that I was following my purpose, but so unaware of it and not awake to it yet. I was offered to do a BTEC, but the BTEC was very specific in sport or beauty. There wasn't really a creative outlet. And so I really wanted to do the BTEC, but it just didn't align with what I wanted to do. So I said no and kind of struggled on through with the academics and got the grades and things that I needed to, and then went all in at college with the creative subjects. And that college I went to was just where everything sort of started to click into place of how I can use creativity to, succeed and love what I do. And I would not really hang out with my friends. I would be in the graphics studio working, experimenting, prototyping, like a fire had been lit. And so it really, having those spaces, no matter what was going on at home, no matter what was happening within friends and relationships and boy drama and all of those things that come along with teenhood, like I had my craft. And it was funny because I love hand lettering. I used to get so told off for my handwriting at school because I take up so much space on my notebook. And then it became like my bread and butter when I was first creating, because it became my signature. And actually, that's what I really try and instill with the change makers. And that's where I'm living my purpose, is creating creative safe spaces, for one teen at a time, and really finding the things that make you stand out as a kid, or get told off as a kid, or weird as a kid, or whatever it is as a kid. The things that you get pulled up for, or that maybe not always in the most positive light, will be useful one day.
I love that. And I think I resonate quite a bit with that, because I feel like I have this huge creative side to me too. And growing up, I was quite like academic in the sense that I would like do my homework, I would work really hard for my grades, but I would escape in music. So I started like writing music when I was 13, and have since like worked a little bit in the music industry, like got my first record deal when I was like 13. So I felt that fire that you were talking about, like through music, and felt really grounded and almost like, like a safe space, which design sounds like that was that for you. And I love the rebellious side of like, when you said that was me following my purpose, like I didn't know it back then, but going 100% in for something I believe in was me following my purpose. I love that. And then you founded Sisterhood. How did that like happen? So you were flatmates, you started like bouncing off ideas.
Yeah, we had to do in third year a collaborative project. So everyone had to work with their peers, and we knew by then that we wanted to do a project together. So up until now, everyone was doing their own projects, and even if you were part of the same cohort, it was an individual project. But we knew we wanted to work together, and it started around our kitchen table in our flat, where we were, just chatting and being like, okay, what's this collaborative project going to be? And it was really just a conversation around like our experiences that led us to pursuing a creative education. And in that, from that conversation rather, came this spark of like, creativity has really instilled a lot of confidence in us. And particularly these last 3 years of being at university and only focusing on design, on creativity, of how much our confidence has increased by the process of designing and creating. And that was almost like the linchpin. We're like, oh, this is something we keep coming back to. It's something that we have in common in our experiences, even though our backgrounds are so different. But it's that one thing that has carried throughout. And we were like, okay, we think we have this hypothesis. Let's go see if it's actually true or not. And that was the starting point into essentially what was a design research project whilst we were at university. And we just spoke to a lot of people. We spoke to our peers. We spoke to other women who were already had their careers in the creative industry, those who were starting out, and everyone kept linking it back to when they were young or when they were in school or when they were a teenager. And we were like, there's clearly something in this around this like teen time, or this growing up time. And whilst we were at university, we were like, let's put a pin in that. Let's explore this whole thing of like creativity and confidence as a bigger picture, which is what the first iteration of Sisterhood was. And after that, we were just like, there's something to this. There's something that we want to explore. And the fact that everyone was talking about when they were younger, whether it was lack of experience or lack of accessibility, or that one teacher who really gave them that boost that they needed to be able to do that creative thing or pursue creativity as a whole. And that's why we were like, okay, so let's go to the root then. Let's try it. Let's try it. Let's see how it goes.
And then an article came out written by one of our tutors at university that was just saying about how 70% women study creativity at higher education. And yet only, at the time, this was sort of 2018, only 20% actually continue their creative learnings into the industry, even fewer in leadership. And so Rachita and I were kind of outraged. You get that moment where you're like, oh God, we're surrounded by amazing women on this course. The industry is missing out on these voices, these ideas, these leaders. And that's a huge drop-off. And it was not just exclusive to the creative industry. The more we looked, the more this drop-off is happening across every sector. And so we were then thinking, well, if things are being designed and created without these ideas and these amazing women and all of the lived experience that they have informing the things that are being designed for them, who's designing them? Who's creating them? And that really sparked this curiosity to just keep digging deeper. And as Rachita said, and going to the root, making sure that when you are starting to see confidence drop, you're there. And you're not just there for like a one-off, be confident, you can do it. See you later, off you go. But going from childhood to teenhood to adulthood, and how do you actually make sure that there is all of these moments to build confidence, to create evidence, so that when these big opportunities do come about, you know that you are the right person and you are meant to be there. We know how it feels to feel like you're not meant to be there. Nobody said it. Nobody really, it was sort of this undertone of what was happening around Central St Martin's at the time. There was a massive building, new building, King's Cross, and everyone said that they got triple the amount of students that they normally do. So we had a cohort of about 180 students. And I think that is really why I struggled and felt very lost. I felt like a number in the beginning of university. I felt like we were paying for the building. Yeah. No one had told us that. There might not be any truth in that, but it's amazing how if you feel like you are just there to make up numbers and you're there because somebody said so, it really can affect your mentality and how you show up and how your creativity can be so stifled from it when you don't feel free and you do feel boxed in or not seen, not heard. And just kind of put there to fulfill a purpose.
It sounds like, from what you're saying, and I agree with this, that like creativity is almost like freedom to be yourself. And I have this theory that when you're creative, you're like expressing 100% your personality. So like that's why creativity is so like vast, because it's like a reflection of you in design, in music, in painting, in like dancing, in anything. It's just like you being free almost in that moment. So I love that through your experience and like kind of having that in the back of your mind, you're now empowering young girls to be themselves and be confident in like going there almost.
And I think it's so important, especially that you touched upon that, that freedom that comes with creativity. And a lot of the times what people don't realize about our programs is that we put a very, very strong emphasis on creative thinking. That's what comes first. That's the thing that actually unlocks that freedom.
Yeah.
The visual part of it is there to accompany that creative thinking, because it's that creative thinking that brings your personality, that makes you or helps you connect the dots to solve a problem, to critically think. And the visual part of it comes actually quite towards the end of our program.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that supports all this process and work that they've done to build up to it. And one of the key things for us that is so important through our programs is that creative education is not just for visual, creative professions or niches or industries. Actually, creative thinking is there to supplement any job, any profession, anything that you want to go into. And that's the thing that's really like core to what we do.
It's interesting because some people will say like, I'm not creative, or that's like I'm more like a logic person, and
We
I'm
had
more
a
like
pound every time someone said that.
Yeah. So like, do you think everyone is creative, but they just haven't tapped into it?
It's a muscle. And you've probably heard this said before, but this is something that we've been, since we started, is it has to be flexed. The minute you stop using it, you're not going to keep building the evidence and the strength that you need. And using that analogy that it is a muscle that needs to be flexed and used. Otherwise it can just get forgotten about and not utilized, and your unique kind of creativity that you bring will be lost. It won't be heard.
And so if someone's listening and is like, okay, I don't feel very creative, like how could they tap into it? Like what would be one of the ways, the first steps they could start exploring being creative?
I always say, look back, and it's one of my favorite quotes, and I think Steve Jobs said it at a commencement speech, but it's that you can't connect the dots going forward, you can only connect it going back.
I love that.
So and this is something we tell the girls as well. It's like, think back to what are the moments that you felt that freedom, where you felt that joy, where you felt you were really expressing your true self.
Yeah.
Make a list, write those, however you want to. Go gather that data about yourself. Where in those moments were you being creative? Because, oh my gosh, it 100% will be, whether it's in the way that you style your clothes, how you decorate your bedroom, if I'm using an example of teenhood, how you decorate your notepad, your files, everything from something as what people will think small as that, even though that's not small, all the way through to you go for dance at the gym, you go to you love going to like painting, and, all those things. Like look back at that and make yourself show yourself that actually I have been creative, or I have had moments of being creative.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Look at your handwriting. That's what I would say. Like it's in the everyday thing. Design is everywhere. Creativity is everywhere. Everything that you see and touch and feel has been designed and created, and that's where the critical thinking comes in. Do you like it? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And start to flex that muscle of thinking about how you personally feel, and if you were then going to change it, how would you design something? How would you create something? How would you do things differently? Would you involve the community that it's for? That's all creative thinking, and that's just happening in your head. It's got nothing to do with pen and paper. It's got nothing to do with what technology you have in your hands. It is just you and your mind and how you see and interact with the world.
And I love that freedom and joy piece, because it's like, when did you do it for you? Because you can dance because your parents put you in a dance class, and that's still being creative to a certain degree, but when did you feel like free and happy and like present, I guess?
Yeah, that was the first question I was asked, that 2-week program that I was talking to. The first question was, what did you do that made you feel truly alive? And I remember being like, what is this guy talking about? It's like, and then it hit, and it was, it had nothing to do with pen and paper. It was going snorkeling and going, seeing the reef kind of just drop in my stomach, and I just felt alive. I just felt so like it took my breath away. And so then you're trying to find things that do that same thing. I had it when I walked into the coffee shop today. Like I had the same feeling, because I feel alive. Like I was brought back to the bookshop. I was brought back to the thing that we initiated to support the next generation. It's a feeling. It might be here, wherever it is, but you will feel it. And so, ask yourself, when did you last feel truly alive? Look backwards and look at what already exists and where you're bringing your own creative flourishes to things.
Love that. Absolutely love that. I'll reflect on it. I mean, I feel like I'm quite like self-reflective, and I know what brings me to life, and I love to empower people. I love to like create like little aha moments, whether that's like in business or with having like a conversation with someone. But that feeling of like, just feeling alive is a great way, I think, for people to reflect on who they are and what they want to do. So again, going back to Sisterhood, you had the idea, you presented it to school. When were you like, okay, this should be a business?
I think that happened quite organically in that we had this hiatus moment where we had done the research. We kind of presented Sisterhood as like, this is what we really think creativity does for girls and education and all of that. And then there was a bit of time that we had where we were like, okay, what does this mean? Where do we take all this and what do we make it into? And we were really lucky to have one of our tutors from Central St. Martin's who we had a really good relationship with and kept in touch to kind of be like, help us, help us take all of this in our head and like figure out what to do with it. And through that, we were like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to essentially take this creative education experience and take it to schools and do workshops and programs. And then at that time, I can't remember whether it was like back when it was Twitter or on Facebook, we saw a opportunity from an organization called the Young Foundation, and they have an education accelerator. And it was all for people who had an idea or like the beginnings of a organization working specifically in the education sector. And we were like, oh, this seems really, really good. Like this could really help us like figure out everything that's in our head and like give us the structure that we need. And that incubator program really, really helped us to be not so naive and like, we'll just do free workshops in schools and free programs and it'll be great. And it's like, hang on, how are we actually going to make a living out of it so that we can keep doing this and keep doing
and
this
make the impact even bigger? Because
we weren't registered at this point, so we were learning about what a social enterprise was and how you can straddle impact and profit. And we weren't naive in thinking we need to make sure that these programs are free for the change makers, for the girls, but we knew we needed to make money in order to ensure that we protected that they would always be free. And so, you know, funnily enough, Sisterhood wasn't always what it looked like now. We tried podcasts, we had installations, we had manifestos, we had workshops, we had magazines, zines, every sort of outlet it could have possibly been, we skirted around. And then through the Young Foundation, it was like, oh, we're addressing the whole education system, like lock in, right? This is buckle up. We're in this for the long run. And this incubator, you know, this was another test of our relationship. We had to drive to Medway, Kent. I didn't live in London at the point. I had to move out to save up to get back. So I would pick up Rachita, drive to Kent for the workshops with the hope of getting investment or grant funding at the end. We didn't get it, we didn't get it. And yet we did get pro bono legal advice. So what that meant was we had somebody who was going to incorporate Sisterhood for free, pro bono. We don't turn down anything free. So we were like, we have to register this company. And having gone through that incubator program, showing the commitment from both of us to work part-time jobs, to continue to work on Sisterhood, to drive to Medway, to go to all of the workshops, events, work, you know, you didn't get paid on the incubator program. I think they covered travel. And to still not get any grant funding and still be going, there's something in this. We have to keep going. It was like, we would be silly not to incorporate. We'd be silly not to like get this business registered so we can really start to go for the funding that we need. And we did apply for some funding through our university, but it was much more for artists. Social enterprise support just wasn't there. Look now, it's everywhere and it's fantastic, but it wasn't there at all for us. In the early days, social enterprises were, not as recognised as they are now. We were tackling new social enterprise entities like community interest companies, education system, education sector, working with young girls, women, gender expanding youth who typically wouldn't have access to these programs. So it really took a lot of iterations and really realising that in-person workshops, toolkits were the way we needed to go and build Sisterhood. And we didn't just start Sisterhood School, we founded Sisterhood Studio as well, which was kind of our route to making sure that the companies and clients that we're working with are really centering youth voices at the creative process. So it's not only a way of bringing brands into our programs without compromising that safe space that we provide in the school, but it's, our alumni come together with brands and companies to design the next product or project or campaign that's informed by young people at every step of the way.
And what helped you kind of continue to push for it when you had those roadblocks or no's? Or did you have a moment where you were like, should we continue? Did you ever have a point where you were like, are we going to continue doing this? Is this getting too hard or too many roadblocks? Or has it just always been no question around it almost?
Oh gosh, I think to this day, we're just do we do this? Do we keep doing this? Do we continue? Now, luckily, we have the impact, the alumni of our change makers. We're just there's just no stopping now. But yeah, definitely. I think one of the earliest conversations we had was we were one of the youngest people on that incubator.
Yeah.
And so you had people who were either teachers and they were starting their own education business, or people who had worked a significant amount of years in their career, so they had enough savings to be able to then start their own business. We were fresh out of university. We had none of that. We didn't have the experience of the education sector. We didn't have the money.
Yeah.
We didn't have any of that. So for us, it was one of our earliest conversations was, we know we want to do this, because at that point we were we haven't even done a pilot program yet. So we don't even know what the potential of this could be. Right now, it was just figuring out how it's going to work as the logistics from the business point of view, and actually building and designing the program. So we were the only way we can do this is, doing it part-time and working alongside. And then when we did our pilot program, we did 2 programs at one go. We tested out 2 programs, and we remember I think the first day of that program, we were both what have we gotten ourselves into? We're about to have 15 teenagers who we are now responsible for once a week, every week for the next 15 weeks. And oh my goodness, can we do this? How can we? And by the end of those 2 programs of that 15 weeks, we were this is it. This is it. We know it works. When you see it real time, when a young person goes from either they're very shy and they're not forthcoming in their ideas and stuff, because of course you have those apprehensions, to they're presenting, they're pitching, they're
dancing around the classroom,
and it's just
having a great time.
How can we not? How can we not keep going? How can we not pursue this?
It's a duty almost.
Yeah.
There are those moments, and I remember a really tough conversation during the pandemic, which I'm sure everyone's kind of got these reference points, and it was no after no from funding applications, and Rachita was like, "What are we going to do?" And I was like, "We have to show up. We have to make this a really lean project. If we don't show up, what are they going to have?" And there is that emotional pull, there is that purpose, there is that pull, but we were like, what can we do to make this work and make this make sense and make this impactful without burning out, without making sure we are trying to mold into something that we're not. We both had experience of facilitating digital workshops. We had trained in this years before this was even a thing pre-pandemic. We were prepared. We knew all of the tools and tech that we could use. And that's really where the partnerships and where we started to see people coming to us rather than us going to them. And it was this moment of the bookshop, the book project, so the literacy and leadership program, and this was the 1-year program delivered completely digitally. We never saw like anything other than our heads and shoulders of every student.
Wow.
And then the competition to win the bookshop came about, and then we also had a digital hackathon in partnership with the Institute of Coding, supported with the PR of Karmarama as well, to essentially put on a 3-day hackathon for young change makers, girls, gender expanding youth who really wanted to create more inclusive digital tools. And I look back at that and I just think, thank goodness we had that moment to go, how are we going to do this? Because we were so smart, we were lean, we were agile, we made sure we looked after ourselves. We hired a team of freelancers and support to make sure that it wasn't just Rachita and I at the helm of everything. And those 2 projects were like during a time where education was just on hold and completely paused. They were things like, they were 2 reference points I always come back to if where there's ever something that feels a little bit sticky or a little bit, really tough. I think, what can we do to make sure that we're living out our purpose, but it makes sense, and it makes sense not only for the business, but it makes sense for the impact of these young people.
And how can you also like stay true to your vision, but change it a little bit, like learn from people around you being like, no, you're not getting funding for these reasons. Oh, maybe we need to like incorporate that into what we're doing or not. And that's not the right like funding for us. Because I think there's a stat that's like 1 in 10 startups succeed because maybe they do have these moments of like, we can't do this. Like there's a roadblock and we can't go around it. But when there's a will, there's always a way, I believe. And I love that you talk about almost like creating your own opportunities and showing up as a solution, because education was down. And so you were like, wait, Sisterhood could create this solution for all of these girls. And there's a duty for us to almost be there, and there's purpose in it. And then that almost like got you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those very odd things that happen. We were one of those organizations where through the pandemic, because we pivoted to digital programs and things, that Sisterhood really started to flourish during that time. And absolutely, consistently, the things that we have put out into the world are the things that have got us the next opportunity, the next client, the next partnership. So it's so important, especially in times where you feel like, how are we going to get through this, to keep going and take that next step, because it's almost always worked out for us that way.
There's a quote I love, and it might be Kris Jenner.
You love?
I feel like I've seen Kris Jenner say this.
New season.
Love. Which is like, if you get a no, you're not knocking on the right door. I may be butchering it, but it
is her, because I live by that. We live by that. We literally live by that.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It is so true. Yeah. If you get a no, you're not asking the right person.
Yeah. No is not an acceptable answer.
That's a rebel coming out of you. It's so true. Like, you can do absolutely everything you set your mind to. And I know that from my experience, I've gone after like my dreams and done things that just technically on paper isn't very realistic. Like putting music in a beauty company and like pitching for that, or like I'd always wanted to do a podcast but saw a big value in it from a cultural perspective, did an internal podcast as a company. And when you believe in something and you see the purpose and the impact, people will believe it too. And when it's not driven by ego, is a big thing.
It has to be driven by the young people as well. It had, everything we've initiated has come from the impact report of asking the last generation or the last set of change makers from a previous program. That's where all of our ideas kind of sit. We just need to make sure that they're being seen, and we're picking those out, and we're really listening to that feedback of what is missing, and if, you know, certain skills and workshops and lessons and learnings need to start to be incorporated, especially with, you know, technology and the way that young people are working with technology now. We need to make sure that we've got that within our peripheral vision all the time, and who better to give us those answers than the change makers themselves. So, you know, Sisterhood Summer existed not only because we had gaps in our own entrepreneurial journey, but 16 to 20-year-olds is the fastest growing age group that are starting businesses. Yet you look in schools and entrepreneurship isn't equal across the board. It's not always, some schools have a lot of support around entrepreneurship and others have absolutely none. So, you know, that's where we really tapped into the Young Academy learnings of educational inequality is everywhere, and we need to make sure that when we're building a program, we're building it from the place where there isn't anything, so we can then provide our programs across the board at a systemic level that, you know, doesn't just kind of add plug-in and add additional support, but it's really a program that can work within the education system and teach you the core lessons and tools that an entrepreneur would need at this particular age.
And confidence. And I love that you do that with Sisterhood, because I mean, I'm so passionate about reinventing the education system. I think it's outdated. I did an interview to be on a youth board. One of the questions, they were just very passionate about social impact. And one of the questions I got was, what's something you would change about the world? I was like, our education system. Yeah. Imagine teaching confidence in school. How far that would go for people. Like, jealousy wouldn't necessarily be as big of a thing in the workplace. People would go for their dreams. Bullying wouldn't be as big of a thing, because lack of self-esteem leads to bullying as well. So like confidence and helping people do what they want to do is so important to include in the education system, especially because we go this like years and years and years and years to school, and it's supposed to compensate what we don't get from our families or what we don't get at home. So I love that that's something that you're actually making an impact with. And when I saw you at Sisterhood Summer, and I could see these girls like being super like excited and bubbly and making friends, but also like all empowering each other. And you said something, which is girls with a dream become women with a vision. And I love that, because it's so true. And you're kind of like creating that spark in them.
Yeah. And the dream you don't necessarily know. So don't let that be a pressure for you to think, I don't have a dream. Yeah. What's my dream? I think confidence is a byproduct of what we do. So confidence is when you've built the evidence that you can come up with ideas that might solve this social issue, you've then thought about some really interesting ways that you could design a business model around this. Yeah. You've then pulled this together in a pitch and created some sort of like story, a narrative of how you're going to grow this business. Confidence is all building in the background. We can't build that for you. We can create the conditions and the environment, and you know that is why we have this corner of the world which is for girls and gender expanding youth, to build that evidence, so when they go out into the world, that evidence is there to look back on and remember those moments sat in these amazing offices like NatWest, and they remember, I did it there, so why, you know, I can now do that now when I'm applying for my university, you know, place, or I'm applying for this job, or I'm trying to make new friends. I did that at Sisterhood. I can do this now. So we just create the conditions so that evidence is there, and then confidence is built. But if we just turned up and was like, time to be confident, here you go. Like it's sort of that feeling when you sort of get thrown onto stage, but you're not prepared, you don't know what you're doing. That can then have this detrimental effect. So there's got to be this balance of support and tools and skills that we facilitate and give and sort of hand over and demonstrate. And we do lots of demonstrations and practices. And then there's a moment in every program where there's this flip. You have the tools, here you go. Now you can create the project that's going to solve a world issue. Is
there like one change maker, or a few, but like a story that stands out to you where you really saw that shift in someone?
Maybe it's not like one change maker in particular, but like the shifts. There's definitely like themes of shifts that happen that we see in every cohort that we're going through. And I think one of the ones for me that stands out purely because it's not something it's not an intended outcome that we measure and we impact and report on, but it's a byproduct of like the safe space and the process and the program itself, which is so many girls have come onto our program, whether it's the summer entrepreneurial program or the programs that we do at school, and have been like, I've made friends that I wouldn't have expected to make. I remember our first ever cohort, our pilot program, we had one change maker, and she's very confident by nature. Like, she was always like, articulating her ideas and like being very vocal. But one of the things for her, the outcome was that she was like, I have been with like, these group of girls are in my like school year. And she was like, I would never have been friends with them had it not been through Sisterhood because of doing this program. Yeah. And I remember similarly in last year's summer program cohort, there was a conversation I was having with one of the change makers over lunch, and she was like, I've always really like struggled to like make and maintain friends. But she was like, now being here, I realized it's because I just didn't have those like-minded people around me, or not enough of them that I had that connection that went deeper, or that resulted to that bond that was, they all still stay in touch. They've all got their WhatsApp groups and they're chatting and checking in on each other and things like that. And I love that. I love that Sisterhood is that one place where, yes, they can hopefully truly be themselves, but also support each other in doing that. So for me, that's always like one of the like best things to see.
Well, it's called Sisterhood.
Yeah.
You're reminded of the change makers in little moments throughout building programs and delivering new programs, and they often have all the answers, and we look back at times with change makers and they have the answers to help us in the current situation. There are naturally, when you're working with teens at this very pivotal and foundational moment in their lives, and there are themes that come up time and time again, and the change makers from previous programs are continuously inspiring us to be better facilitators in the present day. And I always look for the teens that, you don't necessarily know what's going on at home. It's not something that we, have the expertise to delve into, but for that 2 hours, this is their space. And what can you do in order to make that experience for them 1% better? And slowly over the 15 weeks, 1 year, even in a couple of hours, and they walk away with an idea that was 100% created by them. You can see it in their eyes, their shoulders. They look at you in the eye, they'll say goodbye to you. It could be micro things, but you remember them, and you remember those at the low moments where you're like, how do we keep going? How do we do that? They are always a source of inspiration. So there's never one particular change maker, but there's the change maker spirit, which is there. And you are constantly reminded of that in the next cohort, and you see it and you see these shifts. And the reason why you see it is because we were them. We were teenagers. I dragged my heels to things. I did not feel seen. I did not feel heard. I would turn up the rebellious side of us and be like, what's this? How's this going to be useful in life? How is this going to be useful? We've all been that person. And then when you actually find those teachers and those like real champions and those people that have your back and are in your corner, they are so important, and they were important to us. So it's such a privilege to be those people for the change makers. And they are just a constant source of inspiration for us.
What makes you like more personally feel confident today? Because you're like helping these girls build their confidence and be themselves and create a safe space almost. So what like makes you feel confident?
I would not be talking this confident without Sisterhood being you give me any other topic I'd probably be shaking, I'd have the wobbly voice, like all these indicators of uncertainty. But with Sisterhood, it brings out that confidence in me. It's it's purpose driven. It comes back to your purpose. It comes back to your values. It comes back from such an authentic place of you just living out what you're meant to do and what you're meant to be here for. And I used to work in kids parties. I used to deliver kids parties. I always bring this story back. And one day I got left on my own with like 30 kids for a very brief moment. Something had happened, and I tried to get the kids to the bouncy castle, and nothing came out. Like I couldn't. I froze. Like nothing. And I just would sort of had to go and get someone else and be like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it just shows you it was not
Who
with
you were
kids.
meant to
It
be.
was not who I was meant to be.
Yeah.
And it just, not that, you know, there's a difference between fear and all of the, but it wasn't that I feared saying anything. I just didn't know how to facilitate or lead that particular group. And I didn't feel supported. It wasn't an environment where I was bringing my skills. And it's so interesting when you are talking about something that you really care about and is in true alignment with your purpose, and it will flow and it will happen.
When you are aligned and in kind of like where you're meant to be almost, you might be scared and there might be fear, but something kind of like pushes you and helps you to do it anyway. And maybe that's when you know you're on the right path or not as well.
And I think it's also definitely this whole entrepreneurial journey and having to like get up and pitch again and again and again and get back up has 100% like just boosted my confidence. I remember a few months ago, I was at a family event and I ended up having to just improv MC the whole event, the whole thing. And everyone was just like, oh my God, you had no script. I was like, no, I got told an hour ago that I'm like presenting and like welcoming everyone and blah, blah, blah. And I was like a duck to water. I had such a good time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I wouldn't be able to do this had it not been for Sisterhood. I would never been able to be like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, or just be like, yeah, fine, like go for it. I'm happy to do this. And just improvise on the spot. If it wasn't for also being a facilitator.
Yeah.
Like whilst we, yes, absolutely have our framework down and all of that, and we know what's going on, but part of having a framework is also knowing when to improvise in that.
Yeah.
And we improvise a lot. People won't realize this, but in our, like even whilst we're doing an exercise and we're like, this is not quite it's not either not landing or they're not quite getting it. We need to change this. We need to deliver and facilitate this in a different way. Bex and I will like go away and be like, okay, we'll do this. We won't do that. Let's change it. We'll do that in real time.
Yeah.
And then implement it straight away.
Yeah.
And sometimes Bex will go rogue and bring something in because we don't have time to discuss it, and I'll do the same, and the other person just has to go with it.
Yeah.
It's truly theatre. Facilitation is truly theatre.
I was going to say, like when you're talking about emceeing it was your family, right?
Yeah.
There is that emotional connection and that bond, and when you care about what you're doing, your body, your mind, your voice will just lock into play, and it will all kind of work together. And confidence looks so different for both of us. You know, it's not about being the person that shouts the loudest. It's not about confidence. You can confidently make a decision very silently on your own, and people would follow you, and that's a great leadership quality. You could, confidently show up to a room and you might not speak to anyone, but you feel confident in yourself to go to the event and sit by yourself and have a meal or, book a solo trip or whatever.
Yeah.
It might be confidence just looks so different to every single person, but I think we have been given this sort of very one-dimensional look and feel of what it is. And if you don't fit into that, you might, really run away from a confidence building workshop.
And also like if your voice fails you, that's okay, because like we're all human, and it can be a little bit charming as well. Like if you just laugh it off, someone in the, like, imagine you're pitching in front of like 1,000 people, you laugh it off, and someone in the audience would be like, oh yeah, I like that could have been me. Like,
it's all of us.
We all relate to things that are so human.
Yeah.
Shaky voice shows that you care. I think it's such an endearing thing when I see people pitch. I think, good for you.
Yeah.
Because I get that all the time. And it's, you learn to just embrace that. And that doesn't mean, you know, I can be talking about sisterhood and still, because I care so deeply.
Yeah.
And I think it's a superpower, to be honest.
And flipping it, is there something you used to see as an insecurity or like a flaw, and now you've like kind of like grown out of it thanks to sisterhood? Because it sounds like that's been very like galvanizing in your sense of self.
I mean, I think something that's come out of our coaching recently is, you know, I can be very detail orientated, and Rachita's can be very big picture. I think sometimes you get those sorts of things, you know, either boxed into something else like perfectionism or being a bit, you know, having too much an eye on the details and being too fixated on those things. But actually there's a time and a place for all of these things. And they are where Rachita brings the bigger picture. We need the bigger picture. It's going to keep us having these kinds of bookshop initiatives and making sure that we're 10 steps ahead of what's going on, and we're supporting the change makers in new, innovative ways. But the details also show that you care, and that, you know, they are the little small details that you see here and there, and they are important and people are picking up on them. So it's about knowing when to be detail orientated and when to really pick up on those moments that we really need to focus and refine this process, or the event that we're trying to do. We need to get the content of this and the language around this really sound, and make sure that we are really listening to our audience, and then let's make sure we carve out space to be big picture and think about the future and how we're going to achieve our purpose. And I think, it's not perfectionism, it's just thoughtfulness.
And today you've kind of like reached some huge goals. You've been in Forbes 30 under 30, which is on many people's vision boards. I'm sure a lot of change makers' vision boards as well. How has that been? Like, how did that happen?
I mean, it was wonderful to receive. We got it during the pandemic, actually. So we were the 2021 cohort, part of the 2021 cohort. And you get nominated, and if you get nominated, they reach out to you to fill in a whole application. So you still have to do that. It's not, there isn't just some like person, like Forbes person lurking around being like, oh, I've noticed what you've been doing. It doesn't work that way. But the funny thing is, in the process, is that you don't know if you've gotten it until it goes live. Yeah. So you've done the application and it's just like a waiting game. And Bex has a funny story about this, because she's the one who found out.
I'm the early bird.
Yeah, found out we were on it. And it happened at such a time where it was a real boost for our morale more than anything, because we were just so like in the thick of building and being there for the change makers through the pandemic, that it was such a lovely moment of recognition to be like, we are, you know, like we've come such a long way. And we are making that impact that we've always wanted to make, and growing in that way. But also with any accolade also comes that, like, it's lovely to get that recognition, but
it's very anticlimactic.
Yes.
It's reaching your goals.
Very, very. And you realize we do it time and time again. It's the process where all the juicy stuff is. The process is where all the highs happen, all the lows happen, all the learning happens, all the celebrations happen. When you actually get to that mark, you're just like, okay, great. Let's do the next thing that we had.
And an interesting thing is like the lows make the highs higher as well. Yes. So like, because you struggled, it makes you so much more happy about reaching the goal. But then you get the goal, you're like, okay, what do I do now? That's done. Next goal.
I mean, people start calling you an entrepreneur. Things shift and change, and we already kind of knew in our heart of hearts that we were creating something entrepreneurial, and we, you know, but for the longest time, I would say I'm a communication designer or I'm a graphic designer. And I feel like those moments, you know, it really helps you just step into owning every part and aspect of who you are too. I think they do serve a purpose. It's how you work them and how you use them to get you to where you want to go next. But I think it is really important when you are putting those on your vision board is what is the process, like what are you putting in the process to make sure that when you get to that point, it's not a anticlimactic moment. It's a moment that Rachita had and I had, which was yes, because this has been a really tough year.
Yeah.
It's only going to get tougher. We're still in it. We're still in the thick of it. And what Sisterhood is it's a lot of, it's high input and high impact, but we live in a world where numbers are everything and thousands of followers, and you know, we won't work with you unless you have 30,000 followers and all of this stuff. And it's so amazing to have been recognised by Forbes 30 under 30 with putting something that is high input and high impact, and them seeing the value of that in the education system, and then being recognised in social impact in education. Again, it was that moment of we're keep going. There's something.
We're worth it, clearly.
And it is such a North Star for us. Not the award, but the high input, high impact, because this is an investment that you make in a young person's life that is planting seeds to trees that we are probably not even going to see in our lifetime. And that for us is the real important shift that needs to happen in people's mindset, is that we're not in this for the short-term gain. You know, this isn't just kind of a match that we're lighting and sparking. We're kind of keeping the flame going, and how do we keep the flame going?
And it's also what you do with that recognition, right? With, like, for us, I now cannot wait to nominate change makers to be on that list. I can't wait, because one of the ways that they get nominations is they reach out to people who have been previous awardees to nominate people that they know, and then they'll do that whole process. So I can't wait now that we're part of that community, to nominate a change-making business that has come out of Sisterhood Summer. Like our dream is 100% to see like multiple change makers on that list for like in future years.
And that will happen. There's no doubt that will happen.
Exactly.
50 businesses are being started at as of summer 2024.
Insane.
There'll be 50 businesses started at Sisterhood Summer.
That's insane. We're kind of like coming towards an end. I just want people listening, if they have like an idea, again, like how, in your opinion, can they be that self-starter? Like what are some first steps they can take, or something they need to keep in mind? Like what's your advice to them?
Well, we have a self-starter guided journal that is available to download right away, which you can find on our website. And
we'll put the link.
Yes, and this has got essentially the whole process that you're just talking about, everything from understanding what a social business is, knowing how to identify a social business in your everyday life and looking for inspiring examples to bounce off of, all the way through to practical exercises that you can do, being that true self-starter that you are, anywhere, on the train, at home, in school, wherever you are. This journal will be there to kind of guide you through that process. You can pick it up and put it down as and when you like. And what you'll walk away with is a really strong understanding of what good social business looks like. A whole pool of ideas that you've come up with that are, you know, able to be developed to the next stage. And obviously by joining the Sisterhood community, you'll be receiving tools and tips and a community of people, experts, and future events that you'll be invited to really kind of think about what's next for your idea. And we just hope that we see you at Sisterhood Summer in 2025.
So I have like 4 rapid fire questions that I ask every guest at the end. The first question is, what's like a piece of advice or a life lesson that someone has given you that's really stuck?
Mine was when I had just been dropped off for foundation, and like my dad dropped me off. Like, my dad was just like, drop me off, went like left, and I was just like, I'm all on my own. And I remember calling my cousin, and she told me, and it's the one piece of advice that's quite literally transformed my life, which was, you're going to learn how to be friends with yourself and start and enjoy your own company. And that has totally transformed my life. I genuinely love spending time with myself, and I need it. It's the time where I like come back to myself. I'm able to reflect, and all those things happen then. So 100%, that is the one nugget of advice that's just been excellent.
I love that. And like, you get to know yourself, what you love doing, and then enjoy it. And what about you?
It has to be, I mean, that teacher, Ratna, who pulled me up in second year and was essentially saying, just be yourself. And I know it does, even to say it, you're like, that seems like such an obvious answer, but you can't underestimate it in spaces where you might not always feel like that's possible, but you do it anyway. And I truly don't think Sisterhood would exist in the way that it does without that advice and that investment in me and the space that was created in that moment and that shift that was created in that moment. So thanks, Ratna.
And it's true, because even if, I mean, you can say like be yourself like day to day, but if you're like an investor meeting and you feel like you have to present yourself in a certain way, then you're not being yourself, and maybe then that's not the right match for you or your business at the end of the day. So it's a really, like, when it clicks in your brain, I think it's such a important piece of advice as well. What's a lesson that you thought you learned, but actually you hadn't?
For me, I think this is the plight of my life, which is patience. I always think like, oh yes, I've become patient in like this particular no, that scenario will go another level up and my patience will not be there.
Yeah.
I think it's like creativity. I think it's a muscle that I have to very consciously and continuously keep going and keep exercising that for sure.
Mine's not so much patience, but I do resonate with I love a puzzle. I think a lot of patience is required for that. So I don't want to say patience, but I do resonate with the idea of pause. And this is something, I think as a creative, you can fall into this trap of constantly creating and fixing things and feeling that you have to feel that silence, or that if nobody's volunteering to go, you feel like you need to fill that space, but pausing and waiting for other voices to come through is so valuable and so powerful, and really pausing and thinking about what are you going to say next that is going to make sure that you're not just reacting, but you're responding from a place that has really looked at the bigger picture or just taken a moment to breathe. And I think that pause, especially as a creative, because it naturally you get excited and you have an energy and it's a spark and it's a response and we can bounce off each other. But there is so much power in pausing more, especially when working and collaborating with others.
Especially also when you're in a more senior positions, like leaders speak last is something like you have to like remember, because then there might be a little bit of fear from someone, but then give someone else that space. That's a good piece of advice. When was the boldest time you followed your heart?
I think definitely it was making the choice to take a gap year. And in that gap year, I was just saying yes to things because it was an intentional one. I had no plans to take a gap year.
There's a rebel that came out.
And it was that year I said yes to so many creative endeavors. Like I went on and it was those yeses that actually made me go into social enterprise. One of the first things I did on my gap year was I said yes to following a bunch of social entrepreneurs. I didn't have a clue what social enterprise was, and they were doing a trip in India to visit they were investors, so seeing what organizations that they had invested in, and they wanted it to be a documentary, and I was like, I did photography in foundation, so I knew how to use a camera, but I was doing still photography. I was not doing any moving image, but I was like, yes, I'll do it. And I was like, I just did it. Like, I got the camera, I hired the camera. I luckily I wasn't doing the editing; someone else was doing that. But like, I did that. I did a whole book publishing. A book publishing and design course during that, which how many years later came in so handy for Sisterhood.
It's
like
crazy.
All these things, yeah, definitely that was probably the boldest thing.
I love that, because things get planted on your path, and if you say yes to them and it feels right, it only makes sense like years later, like this.
Yeah.
I went back to dancing quite recently. So I stopped dancing at 18, was going to uni, just kind of stopped it cold turkey. And then a friend of mine was like, I'm going to go to a dance class. I was like, oh, you can't go alone. Like, making her feel more nervous, being like, you can't go alone, I'll come with you. And yeah, it was the best thing I've ever done, because it is my space where I'm facilitated and I'm fully taken care of, and I'm actually living what I get the change makers to live, which is doing stuff not just to learn the moves and to learn the technique and to learn how to do something, but to actually feel it and to actually just go with the movement and to like just let your guard down and be vulnerable and fail and fall over and mess up and make amazing friends along the way. So yeah, I think picking up the things that you did as a kid again is extremely powerful, and I felt very brave, because it still makes me, I still get a little bit nervous, because you just,
why did you stop in the first place?
It just, the opportunity didn't feel there at university. I did try and join a society, it didn't quite work. I had a funny relationship with my old dance school. It was so regimented, which it naturally should be in those sorts when you're training for exams and stuff. But I remember having this pathway of maybe going down the creative route or dance route, and I just basically got told like, it won't come to anything if you pursue dance. And so I didn't only not pursue it, I cut it out completely, which is such a shame. I think how different my journey might have been had I continued that at university and had that outlet and had that creative expression. And, I still, I'm not regretting it, but my goodness, what you say has so much power, especially with young girls and the dance industry as a whole. But no, I'm so glad I've gone back, because it feels
good for you for like taking that limiting belief away.
Yeah.
Last question is, who was the last person to inspire you?
You can start with this one.
It has to be my sister. I know it sounds cliche, but it feels like the best place to end this, because she just had her first baby.
Oh,
so I'm Auntie Bex, and she is the most incredible mother. Not only to Kira, but to me. She is just, it's just been amazing to be part of this like journey into motherhood. She's just let me in with open arms. She's taught me everything. She's an incredible teacher, which I knew, but I'd never really seen until this stage that she's entered. And she's my greatest teacher.
I wish mine was like as lovely as that, but my one that I came to. So I think I'm greatly inspired by people who take something that is like very classic and like put their own spin on it and things like that. And I also just love everything to do with food. So I recently discovered this, he's not a creator, he's like a food writer, recipe developer. His Instagram handle is Little Fat Boy Frankie. And he free promo. I know. You're welcome, Frankie. But he does this series which is turning American classics Asian. So he comes from an Asian background. It is fantastic. It is amazing. Like, imagine like Black Sesame Twinkie or like matcha, what was it? He created, you know, those snackables, or like we used to have Lunchables in the UK where you get like cheese and like crackers. And he did one which was like essentially like make your own bao bun kit, like, but as like a snack. I was like, I just love people who do, and he did the whole packaging for it as well.
Wow.
So it was like I was just like, I was like, I'm so inspired by that. I was like, this is just, I love how people think. It goes back to that creative thinking. I was like, I love the thinking you've put behind this. So yeah.
I can see you're inspired. I know you're inspired. Our hands come out.
Maybe a collab will come in the future.
Yes.
I love that.
Lunchboxes for Sisterhood programs.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. There you go.
There
Manifest
we go.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing and for inspiring me, but I'm sure also the person listening. I mean, I felt really inspired listening to you too, but I knew you would be inspiring because I saw that the first time I met you. So thank you for sharing your story, your impact, and we might have to do part 2 just on vision boarding because I know we mentioned that quite a bit. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired. Follow Sisterhood. What's your handle?
At Our Sisterhood.
On Instagram?
Yes.
Any other social media?
Everything is at Our
Everything.
Sisterhood. Yeah.
Follow them everywhere. Follow Little Lessons from Big Hearts and make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, and see you next time.